Welcome, dear listeners, to Midnight Mailbox, the podcast that unlocks the eerie secrets hidden in the shadows of the night. I'm your host, Steve Stockton, and tonight we embark on a journey into the supernatural, guided by the tales that arrive in our mysterious mailbox. Each episode, we delve into the unexplained, the otherworldly, and the downright spine-chilling experiences shared by you, our brave listeners. Picture this. It's the dead of night, and you find yourself alone, surrounded by an atmosphere thick with mystery. That's when the unexplainable happens. Maybe it's a ghostly encounter, an extraterrestrial rendezvous, or a brush with the unknown that sends shivers down your spine. Now, imagine sharing that story with the world under the cloak of darkness. Join us as we open the Midnight Mailbox, revealing the emails, the whispered confessions, and the spine-tingling encounters that defy reason. Each episode is a journey into the paranormal, a peek behind the veil of our reality, and a celebration of the uncharted territories of the supernatural. So, grab a blanket, turn down the lights, and prepare to be captivated by the tales that defy explanation. Midnight Mailbox is here to make the unexplained a little less lonely and a lot more thrilling. Are you ready to step into the shadows and explore the mysteries that await in the heart of the night? Because, my friends, the Midnight Mailbox is now open. Civil War Ghosts. The listener writes, "Hey there, Steve and listeners. So happy that you're doing these listener stories again. I really miss them. Gather around because I've got a wild tale from the 80s that'll give you the heebie-jeebies. It was me and my buddies, Jake and Brent, on a summer night in Alabama, headed to this haunted battlefield we'd heard about. I ain't one to buy into all this ghost hype, but this night, well, it was something else. We set up camp, cracked open some cold ones, and laughed off the eerie vibes. But then, it was like the woods started talking. Whispers like old soldiers chatting about war. At first, we thought maybe it was just the wind, but deep down, we knew better. Suddenly, a chill hit us, and we heard what sounded like distant drums, slow and mournful. We followed them to what must have been the battlefield's center, where moonlight danced on ancient gnarled trees. And there they were, ghostly soldiers, marching with a weight of sorrow in their eyes. One guy, in a gray uniform, gave me what appeared to be a spectral salute. It was like they were lost, just like us. The drums hit their peak, and then, poof, the soldiers vanished, leaving us in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the echoes of a long-gone war. We stumbled back to camp in a daze, packed up just as dawn was breaking, and hightailed it out of there. But that haunted night, it stuck in my head like a catchy tune that you just can't shake. So there it is, my brush with ghostly soldiers in the 1980s. Did we really cross paths with the past? Who knows? Anyway, keep those lights on and catch you on the creepy flip side. Thanks again. Signed, George. College UFO Encounter. Hey Steve, love the show and thought I'd toss my hat into the ring with a wild story that still gives me the chills. So, back in college, I had this totally bizarre run-in with a UFO. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but hear me out. It was a crisp fall night, and I'm strolling back to my dorm after a late-night library sesh. Everything's chill until I spot this weird light in the sky. At first, I'm thinking, oh, it's just a plane doing plane things. But nope, this thing's playing hopscotch up there, zigzagging like it's on a joyride. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to make sense of the cosmic disco show. The light gets brighter, and I swear the air feels electric or something. My heart's about to beat out of my chest. And here's where it gets fuzzy. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly, it was gone. The light disappeared faster than I could imagine. I shake my head, try to collect myself, and notice it's completely quiet. No usual night sounds, just silence. I glance at my watch, and it's like I've lost a pretty good chunk of time, like a plot hole in my life story. Next day, I told my friends, expected a "whoa, that's nuts," but instead, I get a laugh track. They blame caffeine and stress. I even hit the books digging into the UFO tales, feeling like a character out of a paranormal TV show. I can't explain it. Was it a caffeine-induced space trip, or did I witness something out of ET? I've read up on other folks' stories, and it turns out I'm not alone in this weird cosmic club. I'm not saying it's little green men, but hey, maybe there's more to the night sky than meets the eye. Please keep the spookiness rolling on the podcast. Cheers, your friend, Andy. Hat Man encounter. Here's what happened. One night, I was in bed and couldn't sleep. It felt kind of weird, you know? The room was super dark, and it was all quiet and spooky. And suddenly, I got this creepy feeling, like I wasn't alone. I peeked to the end of my bed, and guess what? There was this tall, shadowy figure in a big hat. Yep, the Hat Man. He looked pretty scary with that hat, making his face all shadowy. I got really, really scared. The Hat Man had this bad vibe, and it felt like the room was getting all stuffy. I tried to breathe, but it was hard. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, but nope, the Hat Man stuck around, just standing there at the end of my bed. I could feel him looking at me, even though I couldn't see his face. And then the room got cold, and it felt like something heavy on my chest. It was like the Hat Man was taking all the air out of the room, and I couldn't breathe right. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't get my voice to work. It felt like forever that he just stayed there. I could tell he wasn't a nice person. He had this dark and mean feeling, almost demonic. I closed my eyes, hoping he'd be gone when I opened them. When I was finally brave enough to peek again, he was gone. But I still felt scared. It was all weird and made me think a lot. Whether it was just my mind playing tricks or something spooky, I couldn't forget about the Hat Man. It was like this strange thing that stuck with me. Thank you for letting me share my story. Signed, Anonymous. The Haunted Dairy Farm. Hey Steve, glad you're taking stories again. I've got one about an abandoned dairy farm in rural Ohio that'll make your hair stand on end. There was a bunch of us, fueled by a mix of curiosity and some courage. We decided to check out this old farm that's been sitting there almost like a forgotten ghost town. Rolled up in our truck, parked a good distance away to avoid getting caught trespassing. Armed with flashlights and hopefully nerves of steel, we made our way through this creaky gate that sounded like it was straight out of a horror movie. The night was dark as sin, clouds hiding the moon, and the whole scene felt like something out of a Stephen King novel. As we approached these old barns, the smell hit us, a weird mix of damp hay and something sour that made my stomach turn. The air felt thick, and the only sound was the occasional crunch of gravel under our boots. And then we heard it, this low, creepy moan that sent shivers down our spine. It wasn't an animal sound, mind you, but something straight out of a paranormal book. Normally, I don't even believe in stuff like this, but there was something in the air that night. There were shadows playing tricks. The air felt like it does sometimes before a storm. We tried to laugh it off, made some jokes, but deep down, we were all getting really nervous. We wandered through the farm, checking out the barns, and stumbled upon the old milking parlor, a place that smelled like death warmed over. I swear, I heard whispers in the wind, telling tales of days gone by. And in the flickering light, I caught a glimpse of shadowy figures moving just out of sight, like in my peripheral vision. Creepy, huh? But the real freakout happened in the farmhouse. Inside, the temperature dropped like crazy, and we started feeling watched. Footsteps echoed behind us, but every time we turned around, there was no one or nothing there. Classic haunted house type stuff. In one of the rooms, we found this old photo album that gave us the serious creeps. Pictures of a family, kids, cows, like a snapshot of a long-lost time. And there was this picture of a woman staring at me like she had a bone to pick. I just couldn't shake the feeling that she was the source of those mournful mourns we'd heard earlier. We decided to bail, but as we headed out, things got even weirder. Now the air crackled with energy, and the shadows in my peripheral vision were going crazy. And I swear, I felt a cold hand on my arm. We ran out of there like our lives depended on it. It was like the whispers chased us out of there. I can't explain what happened that night, whether it was the spirits of the past or just our imaginations running wild. But one thing's for sure, that old dairy farm's got some serious spooky vibes. So, if you ever find yourselves in rural Ohio and hear about an abandoned farm, take my advice and steer clear. It ain't a place for the faint of heart. Signed, Adam. The Haunted Rocking Chair. Hello, people. I've got a crazy story for you. So, a couple weeks ago, I found an old rocking chair in a thrift store. Well, turns out I believe it's haunted. Yeah, I know, sounds like I'm cooking up a horror movie plot, but stick with me. From the beginning, the chair was all creaky, and I'd occasionally catch it rocking by itself. Not like a gentle sway, but a full-on I'm doing my own thing kind of vibe. At first, I thought it was probably the wind or a draft in the house or something. But then I started to hear what sounded like whispers. I'm not joking. Whispers, like the chair had its own secret gossip club. It sounded like it was saying things like, "Why did you bring me here?" or "I don't want to be in this place." I thought I was losing my mind. And you know what else? The chair played musical chairs when I wasn't looking. I'd leave it in the living room, and the next day, bam, it'd be back in my room, rocking away. I swear, it was like it had a GPS set for my bedroom. Creepy, huh? Now let's talk about nightmares. Every time I dozed off near that thing, I had these crazy dreams about a shadowy figure watching me. It was like a horror movie marathon in my head every night. I even tried recording the whispers just to make sure I wasn't going bonkers, but I didn't get anything substantial. Things really hit the fan one night, and the chair went berserk, rocking like it was auditioning for a horror movie. The room turned ice cold, and I saw some sort of shadowy figure. I couldn't even scream. I felt like the star of a low-budget ghost movie. That was it for me. I grabbed the chair and put it outside like it was on fire, and the next day dropped it off back at the thrift store. Since then, it's been all quiet on the spooky front. No more whispers, no more ghostly rocking sessions, and definitely no more nightmares. I did do a little detective work, though, and found out from the lady at the thrift store that I'd originally purchased the chair from that it used to belong to some lady who met a super creepy end. Call me crazy, but I'm officially on team haunted chair now. Lesson learned. Vintage charm might come with a side of ghostly drama. From now on, I'm sticking to IKEA furniture. At least their chairs don't have a ghost mode. Thanks for reading my story, Annie. Hey there. Glad to see you doing the listener stories again. Here's mine. Imagine Savannah, Georgia, back in the 1980s. It's a place dripping with Spanish moss, where every house seemed to whisper secrets. Now, my childhood home, well, it wasn't your typical haunted house. It was like living in a Southern Gothic horror novel. I remember one night, I was about 10, lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when this wail started floating through the air. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks, but it started sounding like a ghostly woman singing the blues. I mean, who knew ghosts had a thing for blues tunes? But That was just a warm-up act. I'd wake up to shadows doing a mysterious tango in the corners of my room. Mischievous little imps, I swear. And there were the footsteps, like an invisible party happening every night. Confederate soldiers with a slow march, flappers with a jittery shuffle. Now, why didn't we hightail it out of there, you ask? Well, ghosts don't come with eviction notices, my friend. We were stuck with our spectral roommates, who'd occasionally rearrange my toys like they were having a ghostly play date. It eventually became our normal, the paranormal, like living with the weirdest roommates ever. I finally got the guts to ask my grandma about the house's history. Turns out it had seen more action than I ever imagined. A Civil War hospital, a Prohibition speakeasy, you name it. No wonder we had such haunted goings-on. Like I said, as the years passed, we just got used to it. Ghostly shenanigans were just a part of life in Savannah, like sweet tea and Sunday dinners. We coexisted, each respecting the other's space, for the most part. Sometimes I'd leave out biscuits for the Southern Belle ghost and hope that in return she'd serenade me with some of those otherworldly blues. We eventually moved out, though, leaving behind the ghosts and the memories. Still live in Savannah, but every time I stroll through the neighborhood where we used to live, I can't help but wonder if those ghosts are still hanging out on the moonlit balcony of our old house. Well, that's my tale of growing up in a haunted house in Savannah, where ghosts are as real as the moss on those ancient oaks. If you ever catch a whiff of blues on a Savannah breeze, just know it might be the ghost of a Southern belle getting down with the afterlife. Thanks for reading my story. Signed, Anonymous. The Old Truck. Hey there. Years and years ago, I was this little dude tearing around my uncle's farm in Ohio. Now this farm was like a spooky adventure waiting to happen. So one day, I'm out rambling around, and I stumble upon this beat-up old pickup in the weeds out behind the barn. The thing looked like it had survived a tornado, but there was something off about it. I swear you could feel it in the air. It had a huge creep factor. I was just waiting for mysterious music to start, you know? Being the brave, or maybe just dumb kid that I was, I decided to investigate this truck closer. When I got up near it, the air suddenly felt all charged and staticky, and the barn doors started creaking like they're in some movie. I took a peek inside the dusty window of the truck, and there, to my surprise, there's this ghostly farmer dude in the driver's seat. Overalls, worn-out hat, the whole deal. I'm freaking out, thinking my eyes are playing tricks on me. But he just sits there and keeps on staring straight ahead. Fear? Oh yeah, it hit me hard, but I can't look away. Eventually, the paralysis broke, and I stumbled my way back to the farmhouse. I told my uncle about what I'd seen, but he didn't buy it for a second. Kids and their wild imaginations, right? But man, every time I passed that truck, I swear it had this ghostly aura. Fast forward to today, thinking about that old Ohio farm gives me the willies. The haunted pickup with its ghostly farmer, it's one of those stories that just stays with you. Maybe the past really does have a way of hanging around, like that old truck rusting into the ground on my uncle's farm. Signed, Anonymous. The Headless Man. Hey Steve, love your show. So I've got a creepy story to tell you about this crazy thing that happened to me back in the day. I was in Iowa, probably around 95, cornfields and a bunch of clueless kids thinking they're invincible. There was a corn maze in the neighborhood, and we decided to wander through it in the dead of night, thinking we were on some next-level adventure. But oh boy, did it take a turn for the bizarre. It was so quiet, it was even as if the crickets took a break. And then we heard this creepy thudding sound, like someone stomping around with no care in the world. Lo and behold, somewhere in the middle of the corn maze, there he was, a guy without a head, just strolling around like he was out for a casual evening walk. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. We were frozen, just watching this headless guy doing his thing. He looked disheveled, but he moved with purpose, even without a head. We didn't dare to make a peep, thinking the thing might come after us. After what felt like an eternity, he sort of disappeared into the dark, and the cornfield went back to its eerie silence. We got the heck out of there, didn't say much, just trying to process what the heck we'd just witnessed. It messed with our heads for weeks. We just couldn't shake off that feeling that we stumbled upon something way beyond our imagination. It wasn't our mind playing tricks. We legitimately had a supernatural encounter with a headless man in the corn. I guess as time passed, I kind of buried the memory, but if I stop and think about it long enough, it still haunts me, sometimes when I least expect it. That cornfield, that corn maze, our once-upon-a-time playground, turned into this weird, mysterious spot. I thought this tale might fit in with your creepy podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers, your friend, Chester. Massachusetts Shadows. Dear Midnight Mailbox, hope you're doing awesome. Have I got a story to share with you? It's about something that happened in a super old colonial house in Massachusetts. It was in the winter of 2003. There was a chill in the air, and I'm holed up in this ancient house knee-deep in transcribing manuscripts. Now, this house wasn't just old. It was practically dripping with history. It all started one evening when I was burning the midnight oil in the study. The fireplace was throwing shadows on the wall like it was putting on some kind of show, and that's when I first noticed them. Shadows, not from the fireplace, but shadow figures doing their thing in the kitchen. I know that sounds crazy. These shadows that I saw, they were weirdly human-shaped, but totally featureless. Imagine a shadow, but without the details. It was like they were stuck in limbo between form and no form at all. I was just too curious or maybe stubborn to be scared at that time. After that, for many nights, these shadows would just show up, just kind of moving around like they were up to something. They seemed to love hanging out near the fireplace, soaking up the warmth like they were reliving some old memories. And I'm just here going through these books, trying not to completely lose my mind. Eventually, though, I went full detective mode, dug into the history of the house. Turns out, it had more skeleton in its closet than I thought. Family sagas, secret affairs, you name it. This place had seen it all. The shadows, it seemed, were like the keepers of these ancient stories. Sometimes they'd do a silent reenactment in the kitchen, like it was their own personal stage. And now the really crazy part, these shadows weren't just random blips. They seemed to acknowledge me in their own shadowy way. It was like we had this unspoken understanding. I'm typing away at these old stories. It felt like they were saying, yeah, you get us. Now, I'm not trying to convince you I was hanging out with Casper's extended family or anything, but there was this strange peace in the kitchen during those nightly spectacles. It was like the shadows and I were sharing this unspoken connection, bridging the gap between the living and whatever dimension they were from. Again, it's not about convincing anyone of what was happening in that colonial kitchen. It's more about the crazy goings-on between what we know and what's just beyond our grasp. This old house in Massachusetts, with its creaky floors and dark interior, became the silent witness to these things that defied the ticking clock. Well, there it is, my run-in with these shadows in a kitchen in an old house in Massachusetts. However you choose to see it, the mystery lives on. Here's to embracing the enigma and keeping the conversation spooky. Thank you for reading my story. Signed, Anonymous. The old house on the outskirts of town. Here's my strange encounter. It was years and years ago when I was in my teens. I'd just finished high school, and one of my buddies lived in this old house on the outskirts of town. One night, things got crazy. I was crashing at his place, just shooting the breeze, and we were playing some tunes on his record player. Suddenly, we noticed these weird shadows moving around. Was it just our imagination? Nah, it was something else. These shadowy figures started appearing out of nowhere, like people made out of pure darkness. They didn't have any real features, just dark shapes that seemed to move in and out of the room. I remember the chill running down my spine like something wasn't right. We tried to ignore it and blamed it on the lights or whatever, but these shadow folks, they stuck around. They weren't doing anything, just lingering and giving us these really strange vibes. It was like they were watching us, even though they didn't have any eyes, if that makes any sense. There were times when the room would get cold and felt heavy. We tried talking to them, asking if they were there for a reason or something, but they just stayed silent shadows. And man, it was a trip. We couldn't figure out what was going on. We thought about bolting out of there. We were just kind of frozen, like scared to move. But then when we thought about it, where would we go? It was my friend's house. Eventually, after what felt like forever, the shadows eventually began to fade away. After they had gone, we were just left there, scratching our heads and wondering if we'd just lived through some strange supernatural episode. Never saw those shadow people again, but something like that, it stays with you, like some kind of weird puzzle from your past. Even with my high school education, I just couldn't wrap my head around what happened on those nights. Thank you for reading my story. If anybody else has had similar encounters, I hope they'll send theirs in too. Signed, Larry. A sleep paralysis encounter. Hey Steve, hope this email finds you chilling and ready for some spooky stories. So here's the deal. I've been going through some seriously weird stuff at night, and I figured you or your audience might appreciate the bizarre tale. On a regular night, I'm out like a light after a day of high school chaos. But then, I start waking up, or at least I think I am. Turns out, my body's on vacation mode, but my mind is wide awake, playing hide and seek, if you will. And oh boy, it gets weirder. There's this pressure on my chest, like someone decided my rib cage is the comfiest spot in town. It's not just the immobility, but it's the feeling that there is some invisible guest sitting on me, throwing a party on my bed without an invitation. Now, the first time it happened, I thought, okay, this was just some sort of freak incident. But nope, it soon became a nightly thing. It's like my body no longer belongs to me at night when I go to sleep. And hallucinations. I guess they're hallucinations. Shadowy figures in my room gives me the kind of shivers that you get from reading the scariest ghost story. So I Googled it, and turns out it's called sleep paralysis. Apparently, stress is the trigger, and with the high school drama and family chaos, it's like my brain is throwing a sleep-deprived party. Although some people claim it's a supernatural thing. I've tried everything. New sleeping positions, calming bedtime routines, you name it. But this thing, it's got a mind of its own. It's like my brain's the puppet master, and I'm just along for a spooky ride. Some people even call it the old hag syndrome. Talking to my friends about it feels awkward. I mean, how do you explain that you're being haunted by invisible creatures? They'd probably think I've been watching too much television. So I'm keeping it on the down low, smiling by day and dreading the night. I've read about therapy and meds helping, but it feels like slapping a Band-Aid on a deeper issue. Call me stubborn, but I'm not ready to go down the medical path just yet. Feels like admitting defeat, you know? The reason why I'm spilling this to you and your audience is I thought maybe putting it into words will lift the creepy cloud. Steve, if you've got any thoughts or advice, or any of your audience, I'm all ears. Thank you for letting me share my personal horror story. Looking forward to more spooky episodes. Sincerely, Dwayne. Hi, Steve. I saw your call for stories for Midnight Mailbox, and I thought I'd send you one of my strange encounters. This is totally serious, and it really happened. It was the weirdest hiking trip of my life. I was out in the tall trees, the ones that make you feel like you're in some giant's backyard. Deep, dark woods, straight out of a movie, where the sunlight barely pokes through. I usually don't get scared, but on this hike, I was frightened out of my wits. First of all, I'd strayed from the usual trail. Classic mistake, I know. But curiosity had gotten the better of me. The deeper into the woods I went, the quieter it got. Suddenly, I noticed there were no bird sounds, no leaf rustling, nothing. Just this creepy silence that was all around me. Then, all of a sudden, I stepped into a clearing. Sunlight beaming through the trees, and in the middle, an ancient-looking circle of stones. It wasn't very big, but it was indeed placed there by human hands. As I'm circling these rocks, I spot these funky symbols etched into them. Not gonna lie, it looked like some kind of bizarre alien tic-tac-toe game. And then I hear what sounds like people chatting in the distance. I'm standing there thinking, what is happening? It sounded ancient. I felt this weird energy. But that's what happened. The next strange thing that was part of this hike, I'm on this narrow trail, trees closing in like a tunnel, and I hear footsteps behind me, leaves crunching, but every time I stop, it stops. I turn, nothing. It's just me, my echoing footsteps, and this feeling of being watched. And then, off in the trees, I see a misty figure. I'm squinting, making sure that my mind's not playing tricks. But no, it's a shadowy somebody or something just standing there. I wanted to call out, but it was like my voice was gone. I started to take a step closer, and it was gone. I'm standing there with my heart racing, wondering what I just had a close encounter with. The last part of this particular hiking adventure, I'd set up camp by a stream and cooked up some beans out of a can, when I hear like this soft humming noise. And again, I'm like, what is that? I followed the sound to another clearing, but this time it was full of fireflies. If you've ever seen the synchronous fireflies of the Smokies, that's what it looked like. It looked like they were making these crazy patterns in the air. Then, in the same clearing, a deer wanders through. Not an average deer. This deer was blacker than black, and its eyes were glowing. And the deer and I, we had this deep moment, locked eyes and all that, like the forest is putting on a show just for me. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep, and when morning breaks, it's back to normal. I can hear birds chirping, leaves rustling in the trees. The stone circle's still there, but it looks benign and old, with the shadow figure and the whispers all gone, like some kind of bizarre dream. I packed up my camp, thinking the trail back home might not even be there, but thankfully it was. I can't explain the things that happened, but it felt like I crashed a secret party in the woods. Either I had some sort of weird hallucination, or Mother Nature is hiding some wild secrets. If you'd like to hear more stories, let me know. You won't believe the other things that have happened to me. Thanks again for reading my story, and I look forward to the show. Signed, Anonymous. Well, friends, I responded back to this anonymous listener, and they sent me another story. This time he writes, once more, I decided to take a solo hike in the woods. Right now, I get chills just thinking about it. I wandered into the woods thinking it's going to be a chill day of communing with nature. I couldn't have been more wrong. The air seemed thick, like walking through molasses, and the leaves were crunching under my feet a lot louder than they normally do. But then, somewhere off in the distance, I started hearing voices. Not just any voices, but voices that sounded like my Aunt Mary and my best friend Sarah, and once, even my own voice. What in the world was going on? So I start calling out, asking who's there. All I get back is this echo of my own voice. But it gets stranger. The voices start mimicking conversations I've had with people, laughing at inside jokes, and even bringing up embarrassing moments I thought were buried deep in my memory vault. I finally decided just to sit down and take a breather on a fallen log, thinking I'll figure out what's going on. But that's when the voices continued whispering secrets, personal stuff, like family skeletons and old crushes. It's like the woods turned into my therapist. And if that wasn't enough, I caught a glimpse of something moving between the trees, some kind of shadowy figure that would occasionally peek out. I tried to spot it, but it's like chasing smoke. I can see it out of the corner of my eye, but when I look directly at it, there's nothing there. I decided the best thing for me to do was to get out of there, and that's what I did. As I headed back to civilization at a steady clip, the voices faded away. It's like the woods knew that it had messed with my head long enough and decided to let me off the hook. I don't know what happened, and I'm not sure I want to. Maybe the woods have a secret society of their own, or maybe I just stumbled into some ghostly place. Either way, I don't think I'll be venturing back into the great unknown anytime soon, not alone anyway. So what do y'all think? Am I crazy, or did I stumble into a forest freak show? I can't wait to hear your comments. Signed, Anonymous. The Black Mass. Hi, Steve. So glad you've joined us here in New England. I have a story from my childhood that I'd like to share for your new show. During my childhood, I lived in a small town in Massachusetts that held great historical significance. It was the birthplace of the term Minutemen, which originated during the Revolutionary War. As I grew older, I learned from a friend who lived nearby that he'd seen Revolutionary War soldiers in the woods behind his house preparing for battle. When I was 3 years old, my mother and I moved into an apartment and were excited to have our own little space. I'm now 38 years old, but I vividly remember it all as if it happened yesterday. I remember having problems sleeping immediately after we moved in. I developed night terrors and would wake up in the middle of the night at the same time, 3 a.m., experiencing utter terror. I was so young that I couldn't rationalize what was going on and would scream for my mother to get me and take me to her room. Every night at the same time, this happened. It'd be like I was woken up out of a sound sleep because of sheer terror and just had to get out of that room. In my mom's room, I would hear strange music coming from nowhere in the silence of the night and see bizarre flashing lights soaring around the room. It's a wonder I ever slept at all. Flash forward 2 years. At this point, I'm 5 years old. This one particular night, I went to bed and woke up, as you guessed it, at 3 a.m. So I'm just laying in bed, but only this time, I'm not screaming for my mother. I'm laying there waiting, as if something is going to happen. I can sense it in my soul. All of a sudden, in the pure silence of the night, I heard the knob turn and the door to my room opened. The door just glided extremely slowly across the carpeted floor. Something in my gut told me not to look. I knew if I looked, whatever I saw looking back at me would ruin me forever. So I just lay there, silently staring at the wall, while doing everything I could to avoid looking at the door. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, the clamorous noise echoing in the darkness. I lay in fear and eventually, somehow, rocked myself to sleep. When I woke up the following morning, I immediately asked my mother if she'd gone in to check on me the previous night. She said no, because she had been asleep herself, probably ecstatic not to have been disturbed for once. The look of sheer terror on my face must have been one for the books, because someone or something definitely opened that door last night. I was wide awake. I know I was. I heard that door open and physically felt someone or something, standing there looking at me. If it wasn't my mom, then who was it? It was just the two of us living there. I knew she wasn't lying. She was always honest with me. I try to forget this experience and go on with life. Now, my mom loved having fish tanks and all varieties of fish since we weren't allowed to have other pets where we lived. The fish would just keep dying. I know fish die, and it could be a coincidence, but my mom knew how to take care of them, and it was just odd how frequently it was happening. We came home one day, and all of them were dead. All of them. My mom just shrugged, said she had no idea what happened, and chalked it off to bacteria or something in the water. That's not what I think it was. I went to bed that night and woke up, you guessed it, at the same time, 3 a.m. I groggily looked over to my closet, which was directly across from my bed, and saw through the darkness a huge black shadow or black mass just hovering over the closet. This thing was massive and the blackest black I've ever seen to this day. I was paralyzed with fear and screamed for my mother, who rushed in to see what was wrong. And, to my horror, she saw it too. She hurriedly turned the light on, and the black mass still hovered over the closet. Looking back as an adult, I know how terrified she must have been. She didn't want me to be scared, though, and I commend her for this. So she just got in my bed with me, pulled the covers up over us both, and held me close until we finally fell asleep. I have no idea how long that thing hovered there. To this day, I have no idea what we saw that night or what was actually happening there. Whatever was there didn't seem to have any good intentions for us, and we ultimately moved not long after that terrifying night. It frightens me to think that something was actually watching me on all those sleepless nights and just preying on my innocence. Unfortunately, my mom is not with us anymore, but I asked her about that night about 15 years ago, and she remembered it vividly but could not explain it. I could tell she was uncomfortable talking about it, and she hurriedly changed the subject. I was hoping she said she didn't remember so it could all be chalked up to my young, wild imagination. But her confirming that it happened chills me to the core to this day. If you ever find yourself in central Massachusetts, beware. You never know what might be watching you while you sleep. I hope you enjoy this story. Signed, Parker. Ouija board story. I bought this Ouija board when I was 19, so in the year of 2018. My friend and I saw it on Amazon for cheap and grabbed it because we were planning a trip to Centralia in Pennsylvania and thought we could use it there. Fast forward to about a week later, we end up in Centralia, and we're in a graveyard during sunset at the grave of a young girl named Jane. She was supposedly known as one of the first victims there, and I believe her uncle may have been responsible for what happened to her in the mines before the fires had started. We soon got a lot of activity after asking if Jane was there. The Ouija board answered that it was Jane, but almost every question, it either spelled Jane or the number 7, with both the numbers or letters. We thought it was weird because we didn't understand what 7 had to do with anything. This went on for almost an hour until we said goodbye and thought to try our spirit box. The spirit box then kept yelling out the same thing over again, and soon after went completely silent and wouldn't work again until we left the cemetery. We thought nothing of it and went back home to Massachusetts the next day. We wanted to try it again to see if it was real or if we were scaring ourselves, so we went to the graveyard that my grandmother was buried in and tried to reach her. We did not mention her name or anything, so nothing could try and trick us. And we only got the same answers of Jane and the number 7 again. We closed out the session and drove to the closest McDonald's because it was only a mile away and we wanted to be somewhere where there was a lot of people. Curiosity kicked in and my friend opened the box to make sure we had put it away properly. And as she did that, my new 2016 Nissan Juke started to idle and the lights went crazy. To this day, until I traded in that car, my Juke would do that any time it stopped, and it never did this before that day. We put it away and left it for a month or so in the trunk storage of my car. There is a place known as the Rocking Horse Graveyard in Massachusetts that we wanted to visit, and we have visited before. It's nothing scary, it's just people dropping off rocking horses, and the owner of the land moves them around in fun designs for a little girl that used to run a lemonade stand there. We've never had a scary experience here, but the Ouija board was still in my car. We went at night, so it was dark, and we both looked up and saw what we thought was a pole in the field, but then we both saw it move. I moved closer to get a better look in case it was someone that needed help. As I got closer, it disappeared completely in front of me, and we got too spooked to stay there. The next day, I was at work at 4 a.m., and I left around 12 to find out my brake lines were sliced and I couldn't use them. I don't know if that was because I was in a bad area or the Ouija board, but it still made me aware. That was the last time we noticed anything for a couple of months. I soon quit that job and worked with my sister, but we carpooled because she had car issues, so I moved into her apartment with her boyfriend and her young daughter. I had to empty my car because I was trying to trade it in, so I brought everything into the apartment. I didn't end up trading in that car yet, but I forgot everything from the car in my room at my sister's for a while. After about 3 days of the board being in their apartment, there was problems with their Xbox turning on and making strange noises at 3 a.m. on the dot. Every day, even if it was unplugged. My sister had also taken a picture of my niece while home alone, and in the background caught something standing very strangely in the hutch reflection behind. There was no TV or other person around at that time. The Xbox stopped doing that the day I moved out and took the board with me. I moved into my own place within the next couple months and obviously brought the board with me. Within the very first night, my kitchen cabinets would open and slam shut by themselves every time I shut off the lights for bed. This went on for months until my friend wanted to borrow the board because she was going back to Centralia with other friends. I stayed behind. I do not know her experiences with the board in Pennsylvania this time, but she came back a week later, and one of her friends came up to visit from Florida. He didn't believe this thing would cause this much destruction, so he wanted to try it in his hotel room. Now, his hotel room was right next to a rock wall, where it was believed that some woman was buried in, so we thought that would be a good spot. We played and got something very cheerful at first, until it started to spell out Jane and 7 again. Being curious, my friend broke out the spirit box again, while me and my Florida friend kept the board going. She was getting the exact same answers as we were. She put the spirit box away, and she put her hands back on the board, and it started going crazy, going back and forth. I know Zozo is the demon of the board, but that's all it was spelling, and I didn't believe it until that day. We quickly ended the session, and as we said goodbye, all the hangers in the closet went crazy, and my friend was too scared to stay in there alone, so I spent the night, and we did not sleep at all that night. My sister was throwing a Halloween party, and my friend had brought the board, and we thought it could be used as a prop, but we never touched the planchette to the board. It has been at my sister's house ever since, and nothing happened that night, but since that day, the new Xbox has been turning on and off again, and we've all seen things walking around the house. Things are happening to this day as we've opened the box for the first time since Halloween, and within minutes, my sister's bearded dragon's tank started to smoke from the lamp that has never happened in the years that they've had him. Signed, Anonymous. Hi Steve, this is AJK from the YouTube channel The Retrospective Vault. When I was a child, my parents divorced and they both remarried eventually, and my mother and I, along with my new stepfamily, moved to a new house. The house was located near a real nice subdivision named Buck Lake in northern Illinois. This place was a nice place to move to. It was out in the country and very quiet. There was also no shortage of children to run around the neighborhood with. This area had a pond and creek that ran into Buck Lake that was man-made by a small dam. People could fish, swim, and canoe on the lake, and even ice skate in the winter months. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I don't remember how long I'd been living in the house when I had my first encounter. I woke up one night and I could look out my bedroom door down the hall and into the kitchen. There stood two ghostly-looking figures next to the refrigerator. A third orb-looking thing was racing real fast around the soup tureen on top of the refrigerator. At my age and height, I thought the refrigerator was tall. The one ghostly figure standing next to the fridge was strangely contorted. It looked like it was bent in an awkward position. After that incident, I never slept with the bedroom door open. I don't understand why that house was haunted, but I could only guess. Either the previous owners invited them in, or the land around the area is cursed. Strange occurrences would happen to things in my room. I had a snow globe that was knocked over on the floor, which broke it. I would wake up with scratches on my body, and my mother would ask if I'd been playing rough with a dog. Another time, I was in my room, but thankfully not alone in the house. I had a mirror that hung over my dresser drawers that reflected in the hallway outside my bedroom. A small, pitch-black figure walked past my room in the hallway. It was short, maybe 3 feet tall. It was holding what looked like a stick with a chicken egg on the end of it. It scared me real bad, and I ran to the other side of the house where all the adults were. I don't know what was worse, seeing ghosts and being scared, or nobody believing me when I told them what I'd seen. As time went on, we moved to another house in town, and I could walk to school. I didn't see anything in the new house. It wouldn't be until years later as an adult that I would experience paranormal activity again. To be continued? Thanks, AJK, for sending that in, and absolutely, feel free to send us more stories of your personal encounters. That brings us to the end of our first episode of Midnight Mailbox, featuring your paranormal stories and strange encounters. Are you someone who's experienced the unexplainable, the eerie, or the downright mysterious? Have you, dear listener, ever had a paranormal encounter that sent shivers down your spine? If so, we want to hear from you for future episodes. We invite you to share your personal paranormal experiences. Email your stories to midnightmailbox13@gmail.com. This podcast aims to create a space where individuals from all walks of life can come together to share their unexplained encounters with the supernatural. Whether you've encountered ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, or anything else that defies rational explanation, we want to hear your story. Your first-hand experiences can be a source of intrigue, inspiration, and even comfort for those who may have had similar encounters. Thank you for being a part of this thrilling journey into the world of the paranormal. We can't wait to listen to your spooky tales. Stay safe out there. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time. Tell your animals I said hi.